And where does fear fit into this picture? What is fear? How is it created?
Fear
and how
is
do we get rid of it?
Fear is, you can't get rid of anything. But you can replace it with something else. Fear is a powerful emotion that exists within you when you have chronically, for a long period of time, harbored thoughts that are really offbeat of who you are. In other words, fear comes, in other words, if you sort of want something and you're thinking a contradictory thought, it's sort of uncomfortable. If you really want something and you're thinking a contradictory thought, it feels really strong. So fear usually is contradiction to the very basis of who you are. In other words, fear comes up in people when they pronounce themselves incapable and unworthy. In other words, that feeling of unworthiness, that empty feeling feels like fear, like almost like panic, like what am I doing? Or when you care very much about living a long and healthy life and you hold a thought about something that could take you out. Or in other words, think about even the conversation that's happening globally as there are fear mongers trying to get you to focus upon the most awful things that they can even conceive and make up. And the reason that those thoughts feel so awful is not because you're on the brink of some disaster. It's because you're harboring thoughts that are so far from what is in your vibrational escrow, from what the legacy that's lined up from you, from what source within you knows you're headed to. Fear is a valid emotional response to really bogus thoughts.
Is it protecting us in a sense?
In the beginning, as Esther felt our conversation about this, she called it a warning bell. But warning bell is not the best. In other words, it lets you know you're really off track. And it could let you reach for something that feels better. But what were the words you used about it?
Is it protecting us in some way, shape, or form?
The opposite. It's letting you know that as long as you hold the thought that holds you there, you're depriving yourself of what you want and who you are.
Fear is learned, correct? It's not something we're born with.
Well, the thought is learned. The fear is the response to the learned thought. In other words, let's get these words of these emotions, let's put them in the right context. They are indicators of vibrational mix. So when you feel strong fear, what that means is you've thought a thought, you probably learned it from somebody else. There's probably a lot of people around you that think the same thought. You practice it often, so you hold yourself there, and it really contradicts something that you really know. So, give us an example of something from which you find the feeling of fear. What kind of thoughts make you feel fear? What are you talking about?
Well, I think it's just overall the idea that we're born fearless. We're born, we may be fearful of loud noises and falling or something.
Yes, but now it's just rhetoric. Talk to us about something that causes fear.
Like, for example, fear of failure is something that I think is fairly rampant among humans. But it's not something that we're born with. Those words may be accurate in the sense that because the larger part of you not only knows you will succeed, but knows you are succeeding. And so contradictory thoughts would feel empty and awful. But when people they say fear of failure and it's like blah, 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 blah. In other words, give us an example of something over which you feel fear. We really don't think that anyone is really sitting in any kind of sin. They're complaining about failure. They might be worried about it. But the idea that I fear failure. Well, all it means is if you fear failure, you're looking at failure. If you fear a bear, you're probably looking at a bear. But it's
and the bear or the failure both seem to contradict the long, healthy, progressive, productive life you want to live.
Sure. So, we can use rejection. We can use fear of what other people are thinking. We can use a lot of different
But now
fears.
you're just complicating it because what other people are thinking, they may have trained you into your thought. But there are a lot of people thinking a lot of thoughts. That's the new book that is about ready for the publisher is full of flawed premises. In other words, what other people think about you has nothing to do with you because they can't even think an accurate, clear thought about you. They can't see you other than through the lens of their selfish eyes. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But no one can see you accurately. But your response to how they're seeing you, now that's another thing. That's something that you do have control about.
Okay.
A lot of conversation about fear. Is there no fear in you?
No, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, there's fear in me.
So what happens that makes you feel fear?
You know, fear of being different, of what other people are going to think of me.
All right, so let's talk about that. So I fear that I won't be accepted. I fear that I'll look weird. I fear that I'll be different. And we say, it's worth being afraid of if that matters to you. Because the alternative is, you see, the way it's playing out for most people is, we talked about this earlier. You're really going to like this. So when we said to you, there are a few things that you have to accept in order for any of this to make sense or for you to be able to apply it in any sensible, conscious way. First is, you have to accept that you're more than in this physical body. A lot of people believe that they were before they got here, and they hope they will be later, but they don't understand that they are at the same time. So therefore, they don't understand their emotions. So they aren't using their emotions to guide them at all. So if you're not using what Source thinks as your guiding light, what are you using? Well, what that one thinks, what that one thinks. Started out, it was just my mom and dad, but then they didn't agree, and then I got confused. And then it was just my teacher, but then this teacher thought different than my parents, and that teacher thought different than that teacher, and the teachers were arguing with each other, and then I didn't know what to do. So then I started caring about what my peers thought, but then they couldn't make up their mind either. And so what happens with so many people is that they train themselves away from this guidance into that and that and that and that, and then they get all scattered, and then they begin doing the most flawed thing of all. They begin to sort out manifestations instead of having any mind to how the manifestations came about, any mind to vibration and focus and alignment. Instead, they're just looking at manifestations and they're saying, oh, those manifestations are really bad. Never mind the mindset of the people that are living that way. Oh, those manifestations are really good. Never mind the mindset of the people who are living that way. Let's not talk about the cause of the creation, most people say, without meaning to. Let's instead just tally up all the manifestations. Let's catalog them and pigeonhole them. And let's call these good ones and these bad ones. And so then all these religions and all these rules and laws, as people try to sort out, because what people seem to come to believe erroneously is that I want to feel good. They know they do. They're born innately knowing and remembering what it felt like to be in the vortex. And now that they're not in the vortex, they're trying to find some way of controlling the conditions so that they will feel better. So they say, let's have a war against drugs and a war against poverty and a war against cancer and a war against AIDS and a war against teenage pregnancy and a war against terrorism, a war against, not realizing that the harder they push against what they don't want, the more of it becomes and the closer to it they become. So then people just become sort of frantic, maybe even fearful like you're describing, because with all of that, they keep asking for more, but then they aren't paying any attention to their guidance system, so they can't go in the direction of what they're asking for. And then they spend lifetimes trying to sort out the details of all of that, pronouncing this block of people wrong, this religion right, this religion wrong, this behavior right, this behavior wrong, the way you marry is right, the way you marry is wrong, the way you live is right, the way you live is wrong. And they don't come away with it with any understanding. They don't realize that you all came forth intending to live in the way that you want to live, but you never, ever, not one of you thought that anybody else had to change their behavior in order for you to feel good. You knew that this was a creative environment where everyone could get what they want, and that no one could step on your creative toes, and that no one else's negative creation could ever jump into your experience. And we think that is the biggest reason of fear. There is this belief that unwanted things will just come and get me. Your fear will go away when you realize that there's a vortex and you know what to do about it. In other words, the freedom that you seek is alignment with who you are. And so on this continuum of emotions that we've been pointing out for a number of years now, on the end that feels wonderful is your acknowledgement of your absolute freedom and empowerment. And on the end that feels the most awful is that feeling of disempowerment and fear. In other words, it's alignment or not.
Yeah.
So we watch people. Let's take the simple conversation of someone wanting to find employment. And so if they go about it in the normal way, in the way that most people would look at them and not call them weird, then that means they would have to decide early on, before they've even had hardly any experience, what they want to be when they grow up. And they need to start pointing their education in that way. And so they start taking those classes and doing those things. And then they have to work hard to get into the right college. And maybe they can and maybe they can't. So let's say they get into the right college and they earn the reward, they earn the diploma, they get the right marks, on the chart, they apply themselves very well, and now they've got to find employment. And now they have to convince someone that they have the right education, and they have to prove to someone that they were diligent enough and that they were high in the marks, and so they're the ones that should be hired. And so let's say that finally they do get hired, and now they have to convince that employer that he should pay them what they want. And we say, oh, just kill me now. It's so much the hard way of going about it, you see, of trying to jump off through all those hoops, the hoops that keep changing around. In other words, they'll tell you, we need doctors, we need nurses, we need warriors, we need mechanics, we need train engineers, we need ditch diggers, we say, you get to decide who you are and what you want, and the universe will accommodate you. You are sending constant advertisements out into the atmosphere, and the universe is bringing to you what you are offering vibrationally. But before it brings you the manifestation of what you are offering vibrationally, it brings you the emotion to let you know what you're offering vibrationally, you see. Yeah. So that's why, rather than have these long and sometimes boring and animated conversations about the impossibility of sorting out all of the rights and wrongs of life and standing in the right place and being in the right place and trying to make your own luck, we just say, just get in the vortex. Just get in the vortex. Just make that be all that matters. Just get in the vortex. You won't feel fear when you're in the vortex. You can't even get in the vortex if you're in the vicinity of fear. So rather than trying to figure out what fear is or what brought it on, just think the thoughts that override it, you see. In this attraction-based universe, there's no getting rid of anything. You cannot push anything away. Because when you look at that thing you don't want and you say no to it, you activate it. And when you activate it, it keeps you from going into the vortex where what you want is.
You can change the meaning of it, though. Change the content of it. So that we
would say, oh, good, I'm feeling fear. Ooh, what a great indicator. I must be way off base from who I am. Now, what did I just think? I thought of myself, you are a scumbag. That must mean my source does not agree. So if source does not agree that I'm a scumbag, source must think I'm pretty good. I thought of myself, you can't do anything right. Oh, what an awful empty feeling that gave me. Source must not agree. If I don't think I can do anything right, source must think I can do everything right. What an interesting thought. My mother didn't know that. My teachers didn't know that. All those people I tried to please trained me into scumbagdom.
It is always a pleasure.
Indeed.